537 votes as reported by History.com. This was all that separated two candidates in the bid for the White House during the 2000 presidential election. Democratic Vice President Al Gore and his Republican challenger George W. Bush held one of the most historical and continuous fights for the presidency that eventually led the U.S. Supreme Court to be the deciding factor on declaring a winner 3 weeks after the November 7th election. Undoubtedly, accusations of voter fraud and suppression contributed to the growing polarization within American politics that has still created the divisiveness of today's political climate. As a first-time registered voter for the upcoming 2020 presidential election, I know the importance of what my vote means for my generation in order to make our voices heard. With this call to action, I hope to encourage my peers on the importance of casting one's vote that will have a tremendous impact on all of our lives for years to come. Although elections can prove to be flawed system within our democracy, voting is necessary because it gives us the power to decide on quality of life we desire for ourselves and future generations. Now I will explain why do some people not vote. The freedom to vote has always been one of the greatest rights Americans have exercised since the establishment of the Bill of Rights and the U.S. Constitution. Although elections have been key mechanisms of how we express ourselves, according to a September 2020 article entitled 5 Reasons People in the U.S. Don't Vote by a Global Citizen, the reality is that as many as half of eligible voters in the U.S. still don't participate in the election process. But there are a host of warnings as to why some people don't vote. Voting studies have concluded that issues such as logistical struggles, not having a ride to the voting polls, to a person's social-economic status, incarceration, and even lack of proper state ID, as just of the few hurdles Americans have faced in not casting their votes during the election. A study on why voting matters conducted by Demos, a public policy organization that strives for more in conclusion within elections, said that for these reasons, the U.S. lags behind most of the developed countries when it comes to voter turnout. This is voting during the pandemic. For example, the study found that only 55.7% of Americans voted in the 2016 presidential election, and even less of the population, 36.4%, voted in 2014, as stated by the Pew Research Center. This is why voting is so important for our democracy, because it creates legitimacy and accountability towards a more fair and just society. And this is the voter casting their vote. Now I will state what purposes does voting serve in the U.S. Many political scientists say that policies on making voting easier would make American democracy more representative and less likely to favor the interest of wealthier, older, white voters who typically turn out at higher rates. For instance, political experts believe that broader voter participation could ease polarization, re-engender our faith in the government process, and dampen criticism that politicians are only representing the views of a minority of Americans wielding the majority of power in Washington. Equalizing voting turnout across the U.S. will give voters a chance to stand up for issues like public transportation, raising minimum wage, and funding local schools. It is a known fact that the elections are decided by the people who actually go out and vote. and take, for instance, the 2016 presidential election between Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton and Donald J. Trump, the New York Times did on October 2018 piece in regard to Bernard Fraga and Indiana University political scientists using data from the Cooperative Congressional Election Study, which annually surveys thousands of Americans won elections. During the study, Fraga surveys asked which candidates people preferred even if they did not vote. The study concluded that if everybody voted, Clinton wins. His survey also showed that preferences of the population were aligned with the Democratic majority in the Senate as well. Critics, however, aren't convinced there is a problem that the voting population doesn't resemble that the American population does. To be honest, some groups just aren't the infuriated as they say. Republicans have voiced that larger voter turnout could lead only to bloated voter rolls, likelier voter fraud, and more uninformed government, which is simply not true. So what are the consequences of voting or not voting? Choosing to vote is your choice. It can be used to tackle issues such as affordable education, housing, and health care. If you choose to not vote, your voice will be silenced. This means giving up your rights to electing representatives within your community in order to help enhance your life and family's lives. I would like to conclude with these thoughts. Representative John Lewis once said, the vote is precious. It is the most powerful nonviolent tool we have in a democratic society, and we must use it. If we want to see positive changes in American politics that reflect the issues and values we represent in this modern day society, we must get out and exercise our right to vote. If you don't vote, someone else will make the decision for you. Remember, your power is within your vote.